I'm just going to say a little bit more about the block. So you'll see here in cardboard, because I keep drawing around it, so I want it in something more substantial than paper. I've written on certain instructions. So here's the centre front line. This biro line. This is the grain line. And then I've got two darts here. So once these darts are closed, they'll make this two-dimensional pattern piece become a three-dimensional piece. That's easier to show in fabric or on the stand. Now, as I said before, there are no seam allowances on these blocks. And here's the sleeve. So if there's no seam allowances, it means that these edges that we see here are the actual stitch lines. So when we come to sew the garment together, this is the actual line that we'll be using. So another word for this might be a fitting line, because this is where it's fitted. So here's the two shoulders. When the two shoulder seams come together, the armhole will run like this, and the neck will run as well. So when you're making a block, it's always good to put these fitting lines, I'm going to call them net lines. N-E-T-T. I call them net. So I'm going to put these two net lines together, which are the sewing lines, to make sure that my armhole and my face and my shoulders run smoothly. So again, if I put them together here, I can just check I've got a nice run underneath the armhole. The other thing you can also check at this stage, you'll notice I've got my notches in, is because I want to make sure that the sleeve goes into my body. So if I'm checking something like this, I could use a tape measure to measure these lines so they're the same, but I find it's easier to just place the net line together and pivot it round on that net line, and you can see whether or not your notches are matching up. The idea is that your notches do match up, and then you'll know when you come to sew that your garment will go together well. Sometimes during the demonstrations I might use these. Now these are a smaller block. This is half scale. And because it's quite difficult to sometimes illustrate pattern pieces to fit into the screen size and make it easy to look at, I might be using these half scale. So here's a front, back and sleeve in half scale. And here is a skirt, centre front, centre back in half scale. Now if I just put these along the lines of the paper, just to demonstrate the use of the lines, if I place the centre front here against the line on the paper, I can see that it's absolutely straight, which means I can fold, this can be on the fold of the fabric, because it's a straight line. Now if you look at the back here, if I put the grain line, which is this pencil line here, I can see through the numbers, so I've placed this pencil line on the numbers, because that's my grain. You can see that it comes in slightly here and here, which means this line isn't straight. It comes slightly over the bottom and then back in again. So I can't place this on the fold of the fabric, it's going to have a seam, because you cannot fold anything other than a straight line. So just be aware of that sometimes where you think there's a fold, there needn't be. And in this case I've gone and put double notches in the back, which indicates there's a seam there, or there would be a seam there once I made my pattern. Double notches usually, universally, means the back of the garment, and single notches means the front. So if I take this 4-size block again, single notch, front armhole, double notch, back armhole. Therefore, when I cut my sleeve pattern, I've got single notch front armhole, double notch back armhole. And that way, when I've cut these out, let's pretend this is in yellow fabric, if I cut this out in plain yellow fabric, I've got no pencil markings, I've got no words to tell me what's what, but what I do know is the sleeve goes in this way. The sleeve does not go in this way. Okay, so the notches must add up. We have a block here of a trouser pattern. So you have blocks for all your garments. This is a classic trouser block. Of course, there's many different shaped blocks that you can have, work from. This is a classic trouser block. Again, the darts are marked in, double notches on the centre back line, single notch here on the centre front line. It's also where the zip finishes, and 2 darts in the front there. Now blocks, as I mentioned before, you'll find how to make a block in most good pattern cutting books. But there is such a thing as British standard sizing. And here is a copy of the British standard sizing measurements. And you can make your block to British standard measurements, or as I say, you can make your block to personalised measurements so it fits you. And the way that you would do that block is, if you look in a pattern cutting book, you will find instructions as to how to make your block pattern.